Life is meant to be lived from the inside out, where your inner world shapes your outer reality. I'm your host, Armand Martin, and this is The Inner Realms, Lifting the Veil. As Earth undergoes a momentous shift, old structures, old certainties are crumbling. New ones are not yet formed. This is an opportunity to consciously shape both our personal and collective reality. You found this podcast at exactly the right moment. I'm about to introduce you to 4 guides who will show us how. But before we begin, everything I share comes from deep research into 4 convergent sources. I invite you to listen with discernment. Notice what resonates. Leave the rest. One guide may resonate more than another. That is fine. Your inner knowing is the ultimate authority. Now, let me properly introduce you to 2 discarnate teachers and 2 former incarnated explorers. So first, our discarnate teachers. Seth, a non-physical entity channeled by Jane Roberts beginning in 1963 until her death in 1984, offering profound teachings on consciousness, reality creation, and the nature of existence. The information was primarily channeled through Roberts, who would speak in a distinctly masculine voice as Seth. The dictation was to Roberts' husband, Robert Butts, who served as scribe and questioner. Seth self-describes as an energy essence personality, no longer focused on physical reality. In other words, this entity has completed their reincarnational cycle. Seth's core message, and I quote, "You create your own reality. There is no other rule." End of quote. So from Seth's perspective, you are already creating your reality, including finding this podcast. Seth would also emphasize that the veil of forgetting is a creative tool, not a barrier. This entity will figure prominently as a primary guide in later episodes when we discuss the physical incarnation stage of a soul's life. Jane Roberts, along with husband Robert Butts, published many books based on the conversations between Seth's dictations to her husband while Roberts was in trance. This includes the Seth material, Seth Speaks, and The Nature of Personal Reality. You can find a podcast by the same name at sethcenter.com. So that's sethcenter.com, along with other resources and material. So next, our second discarnate teacher, Ra. I have to say, Ra is pretty wild, mostly because this is a social memory complex. If you're asking, wow, what is a social memory complex? That is the right question, because Ra challenges our conventional assumptions about consciousness. Ra describes themselves not as a single entity, but as a unified consciousness composed of what were once 1,000,000 individual souls who evolved together through multiple densities of existence. So instead of many separate beings with private memories and experiences, knowledge is shared among the group. Ra says they are part of the confederation of planets in the service of the one infinite creator. And hear this. In session 6.24, channeled January 24th, 1981, Ra had this to say, and I quote, "There are approximately 53 civilizations comprising approximately 500 planetary consciousness complexes in this confederation." End of quote. So Ra is perhaps the most cosmically expansive source, channeled through Carla Rueckert between 1981 and 1984. In the 1960s, Rueckert joined Don Elkin, and in the late 70s, Jim McCarty joined them to study the channeling phenomenon. Then Ra occurred. The Ra channeling process itself was rigorous while Rueckert was in a trance state. Ra would speak through Rueckert, providing answers of incredible complexity to Elkin's questions across 106 sessions. McCarty, the third person comprising this triad, acted as scribe. So what makes Ra's teachings, referred to as the Law of One, so valuable for our exploration is their cosmological framework. They describe reality as organized in 8 densities of consciousness. In other words, all of creation is built, if you will, upon octaves composed of 8 densities. Well, what is a density? Density here refers to amount of light. The higher the density, the higher the vibration. Thus, more light, more information. Each density vibrates at a higher frequency than the previous one. So what we perceive as solid here on Earth becomes increasingly transparent and light-filled in densities beyond the third density. This is a density we operate in as humans on Earth. So a word on the difference between densities and dimensions, because they're often used interchangeably. So densities here, for our purposes, refers to vibrational levels of consciousness, not physical space. Dimensions are the planes or realms where experience occurs. So we could compare density to our grade in school, while dimension is likened to the classroom or the school building itself. Ra's perspective on the veil is particularly illuminating. They explain that the veil of forgetting was actually an experiment partway through third density evolution. So before the veil, spiritual evolution was much slower because beings could see the consequences of their choices too clearly. The veil created the intensity, the confusion, the genuine not knowing that makes choices meaningful and accelerates spiritual growth here in the third density. In other words, Earth School is intense precisely because of the veil. You're learning faster than you would anywhere else. But the trade-off is that you've forgotten that you're in school at all. Throughout the podcast, Ra will provide the cosmological background, the big picture of why incarnation works the way it does. If Seth teaches us that we create our reality, Ra teaches us why we're creating it. So the formation of the research group, Rueckert, Elkin, and McCarty, eventually became Love Light Research, which published what is known as the Ra material on the Law of One teaching. There are 5 books which comprise the series. And currently, Ra's channeling is part of 3 social memory complexes, and together they are called Quo. These conscious channeling sessions continue today and can be freely obtained under the conscious channeling section at llresearch.org. So that is llresearch.org. And now we get to the last 2, our former incarnate explorers. Dr. Michael Newton was a hypnotherapist who discovered that clients in deep trance could access memories of the life between lives, referred to as the spirit world, and his case studies which spanned 35 years, starting in 1968, mapped the spirit world with remarkable consistency across thousands of subjects. Newton passed on in 2016. But here is Newton's perspective on the information from clients in deep trance. Souls transitioning after death return to the spirit world and go over their recent incarnation and lessons learned, or not, usually with a spirit guide. And after a rest period of an undetermined length, according to Earth terms, since time does not exist in higher planes, so after a rest period and additional learning, the planning for the next incarnation starts with a council of elders, with a focus on lessons yet to be learned. Newton published 2 books on his findings. The first, entitled The Soul's Journey, came out in 1994, followed by newer case studies in his second book, entitled Destiny of Souls, published in the year 2000. So both books were life-changing and embarked me on a personal journey of exploration. After reading Newton, my fear of death evaporated. After all, if we fear the unknown, but once that mystery lifts, so does the veil of forgetting. And I'm hoping it'll do the same for you. So if you want to take in some of this information, I would suggest reading Newton's second book, Destiny of Souls, where he shares deeper insights from his newer findings. Material gleaned from his books on the life between lives can be found at newtoninstitute.org. And then we come, finally, to our fourth source, Dolores Cannon, who passed on in 2014. Also a hypnotherapy regression therapist who compiled information while her subjects were in deep trance states. Session information revealed past lives, parallel realities, and profound metaphysical information. I became fascinated with Cannon's findings. Much of the material resonates with Ra's teachings on the bigger picture, if you will. So Cannon's material, collected from clients in deep trance, goes way beyond the veil and our concept of the metaphysical, the universe, and the traditional concept of creation. So much like Newton discovered, the corroboration was shocking from strangers in different countries describing identical pre-birth planning sessions, spirit world structures. And between the 1960s to the 80s, an unexpected pivot occurred, where clients spontaneously went beyond past lives. Subjects went into other planetary existences or extraterrestrial lives. They were talking about Earth's energetic shift and volunteer soul missions to Earth. Increasingly, subjects were no longer regressing to past lives because they were entities living on Earth for the first time. These souls, energies or entities, it's all the same, were coming, if you want, from easier realities or systems to incarnate here on Earth, which is a rather difficult school. So these souls were describing themselves as volunteers, here to assist with a planetary consciousness shift. Basically, souls had answered an all call across the universe to help out Earth during a crucial time. Cannon described these volunteers as coming in 3 distinct waves. And importantly, during her mid-career from 1990s to the 2000s, Cannon developed the quantum healing hypnotherapy technique, still used today, to regress subjects. The technique is often considered alternative or spiritual, as it claims to work with the quantum level of consciousness and energy. So Cannon wrote numerous books sharing her findings. And these include Between Life and Death, The Convoluted Universe series, volumes 1 to 5, and The Three Waves of Volunteers and the New Earth. Perhaps the most interesting due to its alignment with the shift we are undergoing now. And you can find all her books' titles at dolorescannon.com. So that is dolorescannon.com. Here's a convergent messaging from all four sources. Consciousness creates physical reality, not the other way around. The inner world of beliefs, thoughts, and emotions are energy, and they create your outward reality. When you remember that you're both the creator and the experiencer, with the veil still operational, you can then consciously participate in reality creation while still benefiting from the intensity of the veiled experience. So this is the awakening all four sources describe. Before we begin our peek into episode 2, let me give you something practical, because understanding this intellectually is one thing, but feeling your connection to a higher self while consciously raising your vibration, well, that's when the veil starts to lift. Let's start with a simple practice we've all heard about, but is actually effective to quickly raise your vibration. Immediately after listening to this podcast, during a 5-minute period, list everything you are grateful for. Notice any inner shift, any conscious, uplifted feeling. The feeling we want to experience is that of inner joy. Why? There are many reasons, as we'll discover. But for now, Seth teaches that joy is the natural state of consciousness. It's what we experience when we are aligned with our inner self before the limiting beliefs take hold. Starting with episode 2, we'll begin with the journey itself, the full cycle of consciousness moving through incarnation, before birth, when the veil hasn't yet descended, and you're floating in the spirit world with perfect clarity, planning this life with guides and soul companions. The descent, that moment of birth when the veil falls like a curtain, and suddenly you're here, embodied, forgetting everything you knew just moments prior. Physical life or incarnation, where we are right now, behind the veil, learning to create reality. There's much to explore here, and it's the crux of the podcast, so we'll spend several episodes on the topic. Seth will feature prominently here. Finally, the transition, what we refer to as death, which is not an ending, but a lifting of the veil and a transformation out of the body. We'll move through each stage, drawing on all four sources, seeing how they illuminate different aspects of the same journey. And crucially, we'll explore how understanding the full cycle changes how you live this stage, the physical life you're in right now. Because that's the point, isn't it? Just to understand, or not just to understand the map, but to navigate it more consciously. So episode 2 will describe the spirit world before birth, that mysterious planning stage where the soul is stripped of its earthly identity. What choices are made in that space between lives? And is the life you're living right now the exact one you chose before you arrived? This podcast combines human insight, research, and creativity with the assistance of artificial intelligence tools used during the writing and production process. As you move through your day, remember, life isn't happening to you. It's unfolding from within you. Notice what you're creating with your beliefs, and gently choose your thoughts again, if you wish. This is the Inner Realms, lifting the veil. I'm Armand Martin.